Welcome to the Miss Esquire podcast, where we truly believe your network is your net worth. I'm Riza Vargas, and I'm the founder of Miss Esquire.
I'm Trish Widowfield. I'm the vice president of Miss Esquire, and I'm your co-host.
Miss Esquire is an organization that has over 11,000 women attorneys on our Facebook group and is also an in-person network that ranges from chapters in Miami all the way to New York City. So if you want more information about how you can join our group that has closed over $24 million in business, you can email us at admin@missesquire.com. And today, before we get started, our incredible guest, Pamela Silva, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the two sponsors that make this all possible.
We have Professional Interpreting Associates, which provides interpreting and translating services across all industries.
Yes, and Vanessa Vasquez Alara Law Group is a family law practice here in Miami, Florida, and they service the entire state of Florida if you need a divorce or prenup or anything family related. So today we have one of my friends, and I'm really excited to have her today. Her name is Pamela Silva. She is a mom. She's an Emmy Award journalist. She is a co-anchor for Primer Impacto and Univision, and I'm really, really excited to have my dear friend today to talk all things about career, about success, and also about motherhood. And so usually we start with a question, but Abby, my marketing person, said it would be fun to do something new. So we're going to do a rapid fire.
Oh, wow. So we're starting with the rapid questions.
With the rapid fire before we get into
like
your, your thing.
What is one word that describes your career reinvention?
Passion, definitely.
All right. Biggest lesson the newsroom taught you that no business could?
Maybe creativity. You got to be creative.
What about the on-camera confidence? Are you born with it or did you build it?
I think it's nourished. I give my mom credit for that.
Okay. What do you wish more ambitious women would give themselves permission to do?
Ask for help.
Those are flats for a breaking news day, not on an off day.
All day, flats.
What's the one thing you tell your younger self walking into the first broadcast?
To be present, to not try to rush through different seasons, and to enjoy the journey and the process. It's going to be a long one, so
I love it.
Enjoy it.
I love it. So one thing that we always ask all of our guests is, what do you think, like the overnight success obviously did not happen overnight. It took 20 years. So what do you think is the most instrumental seed you planted in your career to get where you are today?
Well, thank you for the invite one more
Yes.
time. I'm so excited to be with both of you here today and to get to know your audience a little bit more. But I think definitely even today, I think the most important lesson is that you're always learning, that you never reach a certain point or level where you're like, okay, I got this. You know what I mean? I think that's when you become, or you get into like a very dangerous, area of complacent, of settling, of just cutting yourself short, of not being competitive enough. I think most of us are in fields are very competitive. Yeah. But more than anything, you have to put the pressure on yourself, which I know is not fair sometimes, but I think you have to demand yourself to continue to grow, to continue to learn, to continue to educate yourself. I think in all industries there's always something new, like an innovation, like now with like AI now, like anything, there's always an evolution, and I think you have to be ready and adaptable to the change.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think and especially in your industry, I feel like things are changing a lot. My husband was but he was a reporter on the news, and he told me a lot. I think this is why I wanted to also have you, because there's so much that we're going to talk about women being in news, which is very different than men being in news. So we'll get into that. But first I want to take it back to, I know a little bit about this, but I actually don't think we've talked too much about your childhood.
Oh my God.
So
it's like a novela, okay?
Yeah.
Do you know what a telenovela is? This is my life.
I'm a gringo, but I know.
She's a gringo, but I've incorporated a little bit of my Spanish flair into her, so she knows a little bit. But obviously I know you were born in Lima, Peru, and I know you and your mom are super close. So tell me a little bit about your upbringing in Lima before you moved to the U.S.
Yes, and I think it's important. I think I wish more people would ask about your background, because it establishes such a groundwork for how you're going to be as a professional.
100%.
Right? A lot of women focus so much on the college years, on the preparation, but I think it's either rooted when you're a child, or you have to fix it when you're an adult, right?
Yeah.
So we're trying to raise a generation that has less fixing to do.
Right.
And I give my mom a lot of credit for establishing that foundation, right?
Yeah.
So I was born into a middle-class family in Lima, Peru, where we did not have a lot of material things, but we always felt like anything was possible, right? We were allowed to dream. We were allowed to just be happy and joyous, and I think that's very important, and we're very secure, right? So if I would tell my mom, listen, I want to, back then, like, coming to the States was a big thing. I want to go to Disney.
Yeah.
It was never like, are you crazy? Like, not only do we not have the money, but like that seems so far away, like in a different. She was like, okay, like, what do you want to wear when you go to Disney? It was like establishing the idea of the concept that whatever I was imagining was possible.
That's beautiful, yeah.
So I think that was very important. And then, so I was raised in Peru. My mom came to the United States when I was about 7 years old. She remarried. My father passed away a day before I was born in a car accident, and that was, kind of dramatic. So my mom, eventually, when I was about 6 years old, came to the States. She remarries. She comes over. Immigration process was only going to take about 6 months. Of course, we know that did not happen. It ended up being 3 very long years where we were separated. So she came to the States. We waited for the paperwork. Now I understand when I look back at people, I was like, how could people cross the border? How could people? Because you become so desperate to be reunited with your family that you consider all these other options.
That's true.
So as we were getting a little impatient, the paperwork came through. So I was able to come to the United States when I was about 10 years old, and we reunited here in Miami. And that's kind of where my season started. But the TV industry, to me, became a way to reconnect with my family in Peru, and I'll share a story briefly, and I've shared this publicly because I think it's such an endearing story about why I fell in love with TV and how it started so young.
Yeah.
So when I came to the United States, back in Peru, there was a very popular show. It was called Sábado Gigante, which is a Saturday night.
Not back in Peru, like the whole United States of America in Spanish. I used to watch Sábado Gigante as well.
So it was very popular here in the States, in Latin America as well, and it was a Saturday night program that everyone would sit around the TV to watch. So when I came to the States, back then, I'm not going to age myself, but there was no FaceTime, no video conferencing. There was literally handwritten notes that you would send.
Right.
And back then, my grandma didn't have a phone in her house. She didn't have a landline. So we would call neighbor house like once a month, and I would get a chance. And I was very close to my grandmother because she had pretty much raised me for the last 3 years, very fundamental years of my upbringing in Peru. And I remember my mom had this idea that if I got on that show, my grandmother will be able to see me.
I love that.
Right? It was the only way.
That's amazing.
She would be able to see me. And she's driving one day and she hears this auditions for that, castings for that show here in Miami. So she comes home, she's like, guess what? I'm like, what? They're doing, these tryouts, auditions, castings for this show that you used to watch in Peru. So I was like, okay, let's do it. I was like 10 years old at that point. And we show up, and there was a line. And I remember it was here in Doral, which back then it was like in the middle of nowhere. There was like cows and grass, and it was like this part, like north part of Miami. And we show up, and there was so many kids. And I was like, Mom, like I'm not doing this. Like I have no experience. I'm not doing this. Like this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
She's like, listen, I already lost a day at work, which was very sacred for my mom, who was, a working mom. She was like, I already called in sick, so you have to show up. I already bought you this beautiful little outfit, and I think it was like, from Marshall's. It was so cute. She's like, so just stand there. Like, don't ever tell yourself no without trying. If someone else tells you no, okay, it's up to them. But you telling yourself no before anybody else does, that's unacceptable. So show up, let's try it, whatever. I ended up getting casted for the show, and that Saturday was the first time that my grandmother and my whole neighborhood was able to sit down and watch me after, like, I think it had been already like almost a year that I hadn't seen her. So for me, I understood very early on the power of media, the power of connecting, the power of how could I possibly be here in Miami, which seems so far away from Lima, Peru, and that my grandma is sitting down in her living room, in her little TV with my whole neighborhood watching her granddaughter. So obviously it was something that changed my life, and that ended up being the network where I ended up working, Univision.
It's
Am I like gonna cry?
I know.
No,
I
I
cry
think
every time.
I know we do. We really do. We're like, oh my God, we're so bad. We would be the worst journalists, Pam. I would be crying all the time.
I know.
No, but I think it's so special because number one, I don't know if your mom, and I know Trisha's gonna ask you this question about but if she implanted, you feel like she's a big foundation as to where you are today, which I think is really beautiful. But I guess going through even like the whole immigration process, like I know you and I talk a lot about it, and I think it does shape so much, which is why I wanted to start with where you came from and why that's so important, because it's written part of our whole entire history of why we feel a certain way and why we can empathize with people, and like and starting here. And then also to see your grandmother, because I know her thoughts were like, wow, she literally got, even that was the American dream. You know what I mean? Like that's like something unheard of. Like to be able to watch a year later her granddaughter be on TV, like I can't imagine the emotion to be like, I'm so grateful that your mom made the sacrifice, and like the 3 years apart, it was all like valió la pena, you know, like we always say that in Spanish, like it was like worth the sacrifice, you know. So yeah, I cry.
I know, like
I'm a mess. Anyways, you can go on, Trish.
So whenever you came to Miami and you were watching TV, were you actually seeing people who looked like you in the media?
Yes. So for me, because my first, I think, exposure to media was through this, Hispanic focused show, I immediately fell in love with reporting and in a way serving my community through Hispanic media. So even through, college and when I really was more committed into developing as a journalist and studying the career, I always knew that I was going to go back to Hispanic television. And my dream was always Univision. Like I had chosen that network. And fortunately for me, a lot of my mentors, a lot of the pioneers in Hispanic television are female anchors, right? So, and I always say that it's such a blessing to be able to have people that you identify with, have similar backgrounds. For me, it made a huge difference, and I think it made it a lot easier to navigate what for many people seemed like an impossible dream, right? So for me, I always advise people, select someone or identify someone that has a similar story, but also that is somewhere where you want to be, right? So once I identify who in Spanish it's called anhelar, who you wished, to emulate or to kind of mimic the journey or the route that they had taken, it was a lot easier to kind of imitate it, right? So I always say people, you imitate and then you innovate.
Yeah.
So you kind of follow a path that has been established, has worked out for this person, and then you adapt it to your own story, right? So it was very helpful to have pioneers. So we have a lot of female anchors that were one of the first ones to anchor network news for Spanish television that eventually became really close mentors, but also sponsors of mine. And there's a huge difference, and I'm sure you guys have spoken about that.
Versus sponsors.
But yeah, so these are people that, took their time to mentor me and give me advice, but also eventually that stood up and put my name out there when opportunities, started showing up.
Yeah, that's so important.
Awesome.
Yeah, that paved the way. And I think it's interesting because it's so different, like Hispanic networks versus like American networks. Like I feel like, and I don't know, maybe correct me if I'm wrong because I have not studied journalism over here, but do you feel like there's a lot more room for women in Hispanic networks than there are in American ones, or no?
And again, I give full credit to these pioneers, Marilena Salinas, Teresa Rodriguez, Maria Antonieta Collins, and now Ilia Calderon. These are big names in Hispanic media who have, again, established such a culture where it's okay. Like, that's what we're used to. Like, we grew up watching these women lead the way, again, for many years alongside another male anchor. But then eventually now our main anchor is a female solo anchor, Ilia Calderon, Colombian. So I think just having that presence made a big difference. And I think it was very different than having the white single male solo anchor in the the general market, right? So you had all the original main anchors for
it's still like
English
that.
news. They went back.
So
we went, Dora Donald was there for a little bit, Nora, but now it's going back a little bit more of that. And we have Tom Llamas. So, with a little bit more of representation of what the rest of the country looks like. But I think for me, I say this, it's been a blessing. And I know it's not the common thing in the general market, but that we've had such a heavy female presence in Hispanic media.
That's awesome.
I love it. So you started in TV when you were 10. When did actually journalism become your calling?
So I did Sábado Gigante, for a season. So I'm going to say for a few months. And it kind of planted the little seed. Then, I went to obviously finish elementary, middle school, high school. And then I always loved telling stories. I always wanted to be a print journalist, actually. And I remember someone telling me, eventually newspapers are going to vanish. And I was like, what are you talking about? It seemed like such an insane idea. That's crazy. I wanted to write for the New York Times. I wanted to be a Pulitzer winner. So my track was always on print journalism. And then the last, I want to say semester almost, or 2 semesters before graduating, I had one professor who suggested that I switch over to broadcast journalism. So I made the switch, and and then right away I got an internship. I went to Florida State my first year. And then I think one summer when I came home, I got an internship with a local network here, with a local channel that was in Spanish. And then I fell in love with Hispanic media. So then eventually my goal was always to get into Univision. And I remember going online back then, it was univision.com / I think empleos or something. Like, this is like, again, 19. It was so funny the other day, really quick, my son saw, I guess, a movie or a clip, and she's like, Mom, a long time ago, like in 1982, there was no interest. And I was like, for him, it seems so long ago. But anyways, a long time ago, I went online. I would go online every single day, just applying. I must have done this maybe for like 6 months. Eventually, I got a call. It was like the assistant of the assistant of the assistant of the assistant in production at the local station here in Miami. I applied. They interviewed me like 3 times, which was like very nerve-wracking for like a 20-year-old, right?
Yeah.
Like the second interview, third interview. And then I finally took the job. It was a part-time job here in Miami, a few months before I graduated from college. And I've been, at Univision ever since. So it's been a little over 23 years.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What sacrifices did you make early in your career that people might not have seen?
In my industry, you have to say yes to a lot of jobs that perhaps are not what the end goal looked like, right? So like, if you want to be an anchor, if you want to be, a correspondent traveling, it's not going to look like that day one. So I think the sacrifice is saying yes to a lot of things that are probably not what you really want to do on a day-to-day basis, but
right.
You know that in the long term are going to make you a better professional, a more well-rounded journalist. I always say anyone who's worked in the newsroom, who's been in production, even in the corporate side, has a better 360 view of what it is to deliver the final product, right? So I think there's a lot of sacrifice, a lot of multiple jobs, right? There was at some point I was freelancing and working different shows, just trying to get a full-time offer, right? Because a lot of these things are very freelance, or they're by project, or it's a season. And at some point I feel like I was working like 4 jobs, 4 different shows. But at the end it paid off, right? Eventually someone offered a full-time position. Eventually something turned into, and then if in the long term, when I look back, I feel like I make better decisions, or I'm a better colleague, because I get where you are. Like, right. I get what it is being in production. I guess what it is standing in the sun for, like, I get it, right? So because I was able, or because I was forced to do all these other jobs, I do feel like I'm a more prepared, a more empathetic colleague to many of my coworkers because I've been there.
And didn't you start covering entertainment?
Yes. And so I've done it all.
Yeah,
I've
so
done
how
weather,
did you go from there to being like a
entertainment.
news anchor?
So my first position was, I was like an assistant to the assistant to the assistant in a more corporate, but a little bit of production. It was actually, it's called public affairs, right? So they do a lot of the community service, right. A lot of the connections with a nonprofit. I was coming from a nonprofit. I was working back then for the American Cancer Society, part-time. I was a social worker pretty much for them. And that's kind of like where the connection came. This is a department that worked with all the nonprofits and how we help do their media and like how we collaborated with the community. So I did that for a few months, and then I got a chance to be on radio. Then I was freelancing with Clear Channel, which was back then like another company. I was still cheering for the Dolphins back then, and back then our director's husband was a very famous, is still a very well-known, Kenny Walker is his radio's name. And back then he used to host like the Drive, show. So I went back to my boss at Univision. I was like, listen, I got offered to my GM actually, so my boss's boss. I was like, I got offered this full time with Clear Channel. I'm only gonna work from 6 to 10, but I get benefits. I get, for me, it was like a very decent salary, and I think it was like
and in the news, right? We're going to talk about that decent salaries in the news, because I think people are very confused with how much.
I remember actually they offered me $45,000, and I think it's important to talk about numbers because people are so culturally taboo not to talk about numbers, and then you don't know what to ask for, you don't know what you're negotiating against.
100%.
It's very frustrating and limiting to not have that information.
When my husband went to, he wasn't my husband at the time, when my boyfriend went to go take his first job in Texas as a reporter, he got offered $37,000 a year. And I was like, you're moving to another state for $37,000 a year? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like,
So I got an offer before I took this part-time. I got an offer in Fresno, right? Very small market.
Yeah.
And again, it's just, I did the numbers. I'm like, I can't. Like, I don't have anyone to financially support my dream right now. So I'm like, I'd rather be behind the scenes and be but at least I'm in the network building. I just wanted to get my foot in that door. To network, because that really made a huge difference, to get to know people, to network. And eventually I knew that I was going to move up, right? And I was patient. So I come back to my GM and I said, I got this offer. It was $45,000, which seemed it was a lot of money for me. Like, you know, and more than anything, it had health insurance and I was a full-time job.
Right.
But I was still going to be able to, you know, instead of showing up at 9 to my part-time at Univision, I was going to show up at 10. And he was like, listen, let me think about it. The next day, he's like, I'm sorry, I can't let you do it.
Wow.
I was I remember I went outside my car, and back then my ex-husband, he was my boyfriend, and I'm like, but I don't get it. He's like, listen, it's a conflict of interest. Like, Univision also has radio. But I remember my GM was very direct, and he told me, and he asked me a question. Eventually, what do you want to do? Do you want to do radio or television? And I said, well, I want to do radio, but this is like a very nice temporary,
you want to do television?
Solution. Yes, I wanted to do television. He's like, okay, don't get distracted. Don't get tempted with this hanging fruit if that's not what you want to do, right? So it's like saying, if you want to be, you know, the main, clown in the circus, don't try to be like, you know, the lion trainer right now. Like, focus on what you, and be the best at it. But trust me, like, I know it's tempting. Let me see what I can do for you. And the next day, they made me a full-time.
Oh, that's
Again,
awesome.
making, I don't know what I was making. I think it was like $10 an hour, literally. But at least I had health insurance, and I was making that, you know, times 40 hours a week.
That's awesome. So tell me a little bit about, obviously you've been in this industry for 20 years, and I think it's so important because I feel like people also burn out. Like, they burn out, and a lot of people in the news industry leave, you know, after a while, because there is a lot of sacrifices that are made. Earlier on in your career, I know for my husband, being in production and being in the news, like, he never had a Thanksgiving, he never had a Christmas, he never, you know, depending on what was a hurricane, forget about it. They were always like in the newsroom. So tell me a little bit about what still makes you wake up excited to go to your job.
I know people don't believe me, but it's the truth. I wake up every day in a state of gratitude and in a good mood to go to work, right? And it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen every day, but I want to say like 90% of the days I wake up and I'm so grateful to be able to do what I do, to be able to work with the people that I work with. And I think what really made a difference for me was understanding my purpose, right? So this is part of my purpose. And I feel like this is a tool or a pathway for me to, you know, perform my purpose.
Yeah.
So I think I'm just grateful that this job allows me to fulfill that. I'm also very blessed and lucky to have people that I actually enjoy working with. I know that's not the norm. I know that I'm in a season where we have intentionally built a team that feels like a family, where we have, of course, we have disagreements, but it's a healthy, you know, argument, discussions. And I have two teams now, because I do a 1 p.m. and I do a 5 p.m. Very different teams. You know, one is a streaming team, which is like, you know, a lot of young, hungry professionals. You know, streaming service is like kind of like the pathway, the future, and it's a very different approach. And then I have a very well-established, I would say like the OGs of TV, right? The 5 p.m. network news magazine that I anchor has been around for 30 plus years. They know the formula, they know what works, they're very loyal to the essence. And yes, they innovate and they adapt, but they kept the essence of the content and the program and what we do and why we do it very firm. It's a very firm foundation. So I think what keeps me going, I think it's that finding, you know, my purpose, a way, thinking about it like this is a platform that I use to help others, to serve my community, to leave legacy.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of,
great.
we talk a lot about legacy, about, you know, what stories are you telling that are gonna make a difference? What story you're telling that you want your children to be proud of? Yeah. So I think I look at work as like, you know, this platform that allows me to do that. And I think that's why I'm so grateful for it every day.
It's pretty unique for a journalist to be in the same market, right? The same city for so long, right?
Yeah, so for us in the Hispanic industry, is we're very fortunate that Miami's the
like the
home
hub.
to
And there's
our
not a lot of other
headquarters.
places,
So both headquarters. So both of the largest Hispanic media companies, Univision and Telemundo, both are based here, actually in Doral. So I started the affiliate, I started the local level, and I was there for, I want to say 2, 3, 4, maybe like 3 or 4 years. Then and then eventually I was the anchor for the morning show. So I was getting up at 2:30 in the morning. Ooh. I did that, and by the time I hit year number 3, I was like, I can't. So I was freelancing with this show that was very similar to like a 2020 60 Minutes. And they had a full-time position open up to be a national correspondent, and I was like, I'll take it. Like, I can't be waking up early in the morning, and I switched back then, like, my suits and my heels for, like, my sneakers, and some of the most, the work that I'm most proud of was through that position, which was a national correspondent. I did that for about a year, and then I got pulled into the network to be the anchor for Primer Impacto.
Is there a particular story that you're the most proud of?
There's a few. I would say choosing a story is like choosing a child that you love the most, right? Because I think they each represent and reflect a different season of your career. And at that moment, it feels very important to tell. For me, I think it's a lot of the human interest stories. A lot of the medical stories, I think, too, because I think I've noticed at the end of the day, especially in the most recent years, that a lot of the medical stories also reflect a lot of the faith-based stories, right? Because it's like when science doesn't make sense and faith kicks in. Beautiful. And those are just great testimonies and stories to tell. And if you find those unique stories that give people hope, right? I think at the end of the day, you want to create emotion in the viewers. And those are the best stories, like stories that either, move you to tears or even make you angry and make you want to do something about it. Those are the two stories that I think really make a difference. And I think for me, and again, you always think of the most recent, I think a lot of the medical stories, medical stories, like someone that was flatlined for 60 minutes, and then woke up and there was no repercussion, like he was fine. And even the doctor told me, listen, I've been doing this for 20 plus years. I've never seen this case. There's no scientific explanation for these. Those are the stories that I think have a great purpose, because I think it brings people hope when they need it the most.
So at this point in your career, do you get to pick the stories, or are a lot of them given to you?
That's a great question. So it's a combination of both. Okay. I think because you pay your dues, right? Like you work at the affiliate, you do this. Like after so many years, I am very lucky that I get to pitch a lot of stories, right? And if I have good elements and whatever, then I get support. I have a lot of editorial say, and I get a lot of support from my executive producer to give me the green light. So yeah, go ahead, go and do the story. So I do get a chance to choose a lot of the stories that I present, especially the long format stories that I have time to work on, that are not time sensitive. But then I get assigned a lot of the stories in terms of like breaking news. Right. So like a hurricane, shooting, that stuff we get assigned, and we get pulled from the desk to go cover them wherever they're happening. So I think it's a good balance.
Which I know you and I spoke a lot after Camp Majestic, and you had to go out and cover that story in Texas. And obviously some of the immigration stories that you've got to cover recently. So tell me a little bit about how do you keep emotionally balanced while covering traumatic events like that, especially being a mom. I feel like that makes it so much more difficult.
So the Texas floods was very tough. It was right after 4th of July last summer. And you go out there not knowing exactly what's happening, what you're going into. As I'm traveling, because they pull us out pretty fast. On the plane, you usually have time to catch up. And like when I started reading about Camp Mystic and all these girls, these little girls, and again, these are like, at that point they were missing. So they hadn't confirmed, like we hadn't really gotten a full picture of how bad the situation was. So for those that didn't follow, it was this horrific flood tragedy in Texas, pretty much swept away this camp, an all-girl camp, and the youngest girls from the camp, I want to say between ages 6 and 9, were in this lower part of the river that was pretty much swept away, and they passed. So as we start learning more and more details, it becomes harder and harder to tell the story. And then you always have to like refocus and ask yourself, okay, why am I telling these stories? Like, what's the point of these stories? Like, is it to, create awareness? Is it to honor the victims? Is it to be resourceful to the parents? At that point, people were looking for their families. So we're here like, okay, like, tell us your stories so we can help find whoever's missing. So a lot of the times when you get on the field, you're trying to get a sense of like what's needed at that point from the community. And I think that really helps you, feel more useful. Like you're there for a reason. Purpose. You're there to tell a story. You're there to like eventually, change legislation and make changes so this doesn't happen again. So I think a lot of the times you have to like analyze the scenario, but also ask yourself, okay, why am I here? Like, what's the point of the story? Like, where is it really gonna make a difference? So you don't fall into like, just like making good TV, right? Like you're there for a purpose. But it's gotten harder. I think once Ford, not only after Ford was born, I think after Ford was born, I was still like in the mom fog, but I think once he started asking questions. So for example, when we went to Texas, he was like, well, because I was like, it was a Christian camp. It is a Christian camp. He's like, well, why did God allow to do, why did he let that happen?
That's tough.
Like, and you're like, okay, and you're trying to find the best answers. Why does mommy have to go? Like, if it's so bad, why do you have to go? If it's dangerous, why do you have to go? I think it's become harder because my son's asking questions that are very valid, that I have to find the words and the right, answers to justify to him why I'm away, why I'm doing this. It's become a little bit harder now.
Yeah.
He's asking those questions.
And speaking about Ford is such a cutie. I get to see him every now and then at church. That's actually how Pam and I met.
Yes.
And so,
by the way, he sits with me because he doesn't want to go to Boo Kids, like the children ministry part of it. He's always like, "Why is the show so long?"
How old is he?
He's 6. He just turned 6.
He just turned 6. Yeah.
He looks like a 7-year-old.
He does.
He's a big boy.
He's taller than Kai, I feel like, or maybe
know.
they're about the same height. But tell me a little bit about the challenges, because I feel like a lot of people don't. Being a mom in any industry, but one that's so demanding that you don't get to like pick your schedule or where you're going or when you're going. Tell me a little bit about what the challenges have been about being a mom and being, in this part of your career.
I think it's hard, and I think it's getting harder because, again, he is demanding more of me. When he was little, same with traveling, right? You're like, okay, bye. They don't know. They're like, little pot in a, what is it, pea in a pod. But once I get older, he wants more time with me. He kind of makes me feel bad, like indirectly. He's like, oh, like I was in New York for work this week, and he was like, why didn't you take me? You don't care about me. You left me. And I was like, my mom is like, listen, no, he'll be fine. Like, he'll get over it. But be honest with him. So I try to have this conversation with him. Like, listen, my mom needs to work. Like, I love what I do. Not only do I need to work, but I want to work.
Right.
Like, I choose this career, and I'm lucky that I'm able to do it. He's getting it a little bit more. I like to take him to work so he can see what I'm doing, where I'm doing it, who I'm doing it with. So I think that's important. I think has been a game changer for me to be able to expose him to the studio, to my teamwork, to my team at work. But there is a lot of sacrifice. I think, for example, recently I had to make a choice, right? So I was anchoring the 5 p.m. and then I was also anchoring the 7 to 8 p.m. on the streaming service. And then this 1 p.m. window opened, and they're like, listen, do you want to switch from the 7 p.m. to the 1 p.m.? And traditionally it's called prime time because you have the most viewership later at night. People are at home or they're streaming online, even though that's changing a little bit too. But for me, it was more of like a personal decision based on spending time with my son, right? So I'm at this point in my career where I'm like, okay, I'll do the 5 p.m. Obviously, that's like my main commitment. But you know what? It's okay if I have less people watching me at 1 p.m. It's 2 hours, it's longer. But that I could leave, I could spend time. And that meant for me being able to do bedtime, being able to do dinner with him, eventually being able to do homework with him. So I think at some point you have to make very personal decisions where you're like, okay, I've paid my dues. I've already established a good foundation.
Yeah.
I'm secure where I am professionally. I don't need to be, you always have to be, I think, proving to yourself that you're so, in the game. You still got it. But I think for me it was more like, you know what, I've done that.
Yeah.
Let me do the 1 p.m. I'm so, being, what's the word? Relevant and also delivering. I'm delivering to the company. I'm fulfilling a window that's, where they need someone. And I get to spend time with my son.
I think it's great that you switch to 1 o'clock. And I think sacrifice looks very differently for everybody. But I was reading a lot of memes, and sometimes I post them. And the other day I'd post one, you're like, no, not crying right now. But because we have to evaluate the sacrifice. It also takes a toll on our family, right? And lately I've been a little bit more intentional about being home a little bit earlier because I do work till so late. And for them, it means everything, they get so excited. I'll open the door and the sunlight's on. They're like, oh, mommy's home early, like as if the whole world shut down about it. I'm like, you know what, at what cost? You know, what am I missing in their life that to them the most important human being is me walking through that door? And sometimes I've sacrificed that, you know? So I think it's great because you're still going to leave a legacy. You've done this for over 20 years in your life now. People know who you are. I mean, my dad, when he found out we were friends, you know, he watched Pretty Wedding Pacto his entire life. Like, that's like a big show. And
It's
when
like a
he's young,
household name. It's like a little bit of a cult, like the following.
Yeah.
I grew up watching it too, and it was like when I got named anchor, it was like a full circle moment for me. It really was. I was like, and I think it was 30 years to the date that I was in Sábado Gigante, or 20 years. I don't know. I'm doing the math wrong, but 20. It was like a long time. It took me a long time to get there. You know, and people don't realize the sacrifice and the journey that it was.
Yeah, to get there.
But there's sacrifice, you know, and I think for me, once I became Ford's mom, I think I was very clear that I wanted to be present as much as I could.
Yeah.
So if it means like missing, you know, there's a lot of like superficial outside event and noise
that you get invited to.
I think in every industry that you're like, okay, what is it? What really matters? What's going to make a difference? And what really is not going to move the needle? And that's I've been more intentional too. You know, I'm the room mom too. So like I'm, you know, I'm
crazy
because we like the I don't know, the
abuse.
Extra.
Yeah. We're like, you know what? Let's every minute of our life we need to add something to our life. Yeah.
Oh, but it matters. I think
they're happy.
You know, when I look back at my childhood, there's a lot of moments that I'm so sad about my mom not being there, about my mom not being like. I remember performing, always being like, maybe she's gonna show up and surprise me. I can, and she wouldn't, obviously, because she was in Peru. So whenever Ford looks for me, and the other day I rushed out of work. He was doing these soccer trials, which is like another world that I'm diving into. And I ended up like speeding, and it wasn't as far as I thought it was going to be. I showed up for like the last 30 minutes, and as soon as he saw me, he was like playing goalie. He was like through the net. He was like making hard, and I was like, "Focus, pay attention." And he was just so happy, you know. So it matters when we show up. It matters. And I think the older I get, the more aware I'm of that, and the more intentional I am about being more involved and more present in his day to day.
Yeah, it's like to them you mean the entire world, and I don't think you realize it until that moment. They're so happy to see you.
Same thing with pickup, and you know I do drop off every morning.
Yeah,
but when I am able to do pickup, it's like.
The best.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about the Motherish podcast, which I love, and it's actually the way that we got in the studio.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yes, and I was like, Pamela's starting a podcast. I'm like a newbie. She's like on season, I don't know, 54 or something, and we're like 200 episodes in. But tell me a little bit about how that started and your co-host.
Yes, so we launched in 2020, so it was like mid-pandemic. And I give actually Ford's dad, my son's dad, full credit because he had gotten all this equipment, and he's like, "Listen, we're launching a podcast for his, you know, part of one of his businesses." And he's like, "I have all this equipment. You should do one. You should do like a mother one." And I'm like, "No." He said, "You should launch one." I'm like, "But talk about what?" He's like, "Something you don't talk about at work often, which is, I guess, being a mom." And I'm like, "Okay." So I was like, he kind of planted the seed, and I was like, "Yeah, you know what? You're right. There's so much that I want to discuss with. I don't know who to talk about it with. Like, who will be interested in that?" And I'm like, "Okay, other moms." So I kind of did like a little bit of like a casting in myself, like in my head, about who the complementary mother to my podcast would be. And I definitely knew from day one that I wanted someone that was very different, that was not in my industry, that was raising their child in a different way than I was. So I had a boy. My co-host Karen has a little girl. At that point, I was co-parenting with Ford's dad. She was married. I was big on routine. I was big on like no co-sleeping. Like, you know, I was like, you know, and she was very like, "Oh, well, let's co-sleep."
More
like
free
there was
spirit.
no schedule. It was like, so, you know, and also like I believed her. It was someone that I read actually she had writing a blog back then.
Yeah.
In 2020, and she wrote about dealing with a very dark moment of postpartum that I didn't experience. So for me, it was like very like, oh my God, like I felt so like I empathized with her in a way that I was like, I didn't know women went through that.
Yeah.
I don't know it was that common. And she was so vulnerable and so open about it. You know, this person who was not a public figure, always worked behind, you know, the scene, I guess, was really opening up her heart and like was sharing with other people how sad she was at that moment when she was supposed to be at the happiest moment of her life.
Right.
And I believed her. I was like, this is something that sounds very authentic and real.
It's great.
So did you know her before you read the blog?
I knew her very, like through mutual friends, but I wouldn't consider her like a close friend.
Really? I didn't know that.
But she reached out to me, like after I had forward and I was posting, I think I was like breastfeeding or something. She was like, hey, you know, if you ever need anything, if you have any questions, like let me know. My daughter's about a year older than your son. So I put those two together, her reaching out to like want to create a bond. I was like, okay. And then once I read what she had written, I was like, wow. So I reached out to her and she was like, but why me? Like, you know, like why not someone that you work with?
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know. I have this good feeling and I ended up working out. So it's been a little over 5 years now.
That's awesome. And they're so famous that Disney brought them. And this is like my thing. Did you know this?
No.
Disney, I thought I told you this story. Maybe not. Disney brought them to do the podcast at Disney World empty. Okay. I'm like, Pam, can I be your best? I know that would be
it was actually
Karen's
like
dream.
highlight of her life.
It would have been my highlight just to watch
Disney.
you guys.
It really is magical. But I think it's also a full circle moment. And I said this in that episode. For me, coming to the States didn't really become a real thing until I made it to Disney. When I made it to Disney, I was like, wow, I made it. This is America. This is like what my dream looked like.
I know she said that in the episode too, and I resonated so much with that because I remember like my dad's first time he ever took us to Disney with a big camcorder and all the things. And he said to me, I'll never forget it. He's like, I never thought that it would be possible to get here. He always dreamed of that moment because that is like a big thing for people in like South America that they're like, wow, if one day we ever get to go to Disney, even as adults, but then now to be able to bring their kids, it's like, we've made it, you know? So it is so special, which is I think why our love is so, or at least my love, Pam's maybe not as deep as mine.
I'm in love now. This last trip like changed my like perspective about Disney because now that I'm doing like a promo for Disney, but it's one thing. It's about when you work so much, right? Like when you're a career and you have time to kind of disconnect and really be present and really feel like a child again. And really, now my son is, you know, he was 5 when we went this last time. It was actually for his birthday, but it was like having that like moment with him. Like he's my favorite person in the world, and I think I'm his favorite person. So for just being in that magical moment, disconnected from like school for him or work for me, like really, I
talk about it for like their faces when they're there. They're so happy. Like seeing the magic through them is even more special than experiencing it. So I'm like, I'm always counting down the days. It's Pam, the first time she went, she's like, do you have any ears or anything? I was like, I have 72. Which one would you like? I'm like, all of them. You can borrow all of them. Disney's not inviting me. But like Disney, if you hear this, you know, I'm friends with Pam and I can also know.
And she truly loves Disney.
So. I really do.
Yeah, you're all about it.
All right. And just like a few last questions on that. Do you feel like there's enough support in the newsroom for working mothers?
I think in this country overall, we don't have enough support, right? I think there's a lot. It has to come down from very high level for it to like really trickle down and to really create a culture. I think there's other companies that have better policy and better, I think, even culture, right? Like it's okay for you to be remote and work home. Like we don't have that luxury. We don't. And also, I think a lot of it is self-imposed. Like I'm gonna call us out. A lot of it is like, I wanna get back on, I wanna get back in the newsroom, I wanna get back. People are afraid to be away from like, especially if you're on camera. Like people don't wanna be off camera because then you have this fear of being forgotten or being like irrelevant or being, you know, so I feel like a lot of it is self-imposed. And I think we need to become better, especially veterans and leaders, at creating a culture where like, it's okay. Like family is a priority. We want you, and I always tell people make better employees when they are okay at home, right? When everything at home is okay and everything's taken care of and handled, you're going to come to work and deliver and be more focused and just be a better colleague and just like be better, right? Yeah. So I think companies and leadership and senior leadership and also veterans in the newsroom, in my case, or, you know, for you guys in the firm, need to also lead by example, right? So like, when my son has, you know, a presentation, when he, you know, if he's sick, whatever, I'm like, I use my sick days. You know, we have those days. So like a lot of times we don't want to use those days or we don't want to disconnect because of these unreal, like fictitious fears that we have.
Yeah.
So I think it needs to start there too.
Yeah, that's so important. I love that.
Do you feel like being a mother has affected the way you report?
Absolutely. I think being a mother made me a better storyteller. I have a different perspective. I could empathize differently. I'm a lot more sensitive. But also, so that's the good part. You know, I think it makes me a better storyteller overall. But I also have a harder time sometimes disconnecting from the story, and that can also be healthy, right? So there's a lot of stories that just haunt me sometimes, even stories that I haven't told but are being reported somewhere else. Like it takes a different toll on you spiritually, mentally, psychologically. It's a different perspective. But I want to look at it from a positive way perspective, and I want to say that it has made me a better storyteller and a better interviewer too, because there's a lot of stories, a lot of people that feel more comfortable sometimes, you know, sharing your story because you're a mother too, or because, you know, so yeah, I feel like it's had a lot of positive upside to it, some negative to it as well.
So talking about being an interviewer, what's one question that you wish people would ask you?
I think outside of the camera, and I think we should ask this to a lot of more professionals. I think moms in any industry is if they're okay. Like is if they're okay. I think people are afraid to ask that because it comes across as condescending sometimes. Like obviously I'm okay. Of course I got this. I can manage it all. I could balance it all. Yes, I'm okay. But I think it's okay. I think it's a question that we don't ask as often as we should, just to check in on people, right? Just to be like, hey, like, how are you and your 3 children? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like, I think it's being interpreted as being like, I'm thinking that you're not balancing, you're not handling things as you should be, right? And I think we should be asking that more often.
I love that you brought that up because I feel like so often sometimes people see, and sometimes I post like things that are not okay, like in Instagram, because I think people like imagine, I can't even imagine that. She has like real followers. I have like my one private little, but people are always like, oh, your life is so awesome. Like everything is so great, you know, because it's just like what people see. And I can imagine that's even more tenfold for you because you're like actually on TV. And so everyone just thinks like we have it all put together. Like life is 100 times great because you see something, you know, and it's like, how do you do it all? Like, how are you not tired? I'm like, who told you I wasn't tired? You know, like, so I think that's so important because I feel like oftentimes there's a misconception that like we have everything. Everything is fine.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why the podcast for me was so important, was to create that space where people could be like open about like, we don't have it all together. We are struggling with these things. It's like a safe space to share that, right? And also, and we talk this about, actually in church, we mention this all the time, it's about comparison. Like, do not fall into the comparison trap because that's like the thief of all the joy in your life, right? So you're always gonna find someone, especially in this curated like posts, you know, even ourselves, I'm always like, okay, and people actually like when I post like no makeup in the gym or whatever, like they appreciate you being like a little bit more raw and real than like all the pretty ones, you know, pictures. But I think it's not falling into the comparison game because then you're not gonna win, right? Like you're always gonna like want something bigger, something more. Like you think that they have it together. You think that they, you know, that they're not tired or they're not tired, or like or that they could afford all. You don't know that. And usually, you know, sometimes it's another story.
Like I'll post myself, you know, getting an award. I don't post myself crying in my car.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You know, and I've learned actually with this career that there's always a story behind the story.
100%.
There's always like, you know, a story of like why, like how you ended up here, like, you know, or why you're, you know, I don't know, maybe even people that work out, maybe you're working out because you had a trauma. There's always like something that connects it to like what the real story is.
Exactly, 100%. Well, I could have spoken to my friend Pam for hours. I love getting to know you even more today and for you to share a little bit about your background. And she's an incredible friend and mom. I love seeing you with Ford and how intentional you are, how much you love him. I think her entire life is based around Ford. Which
it is what it is, and that's what I'm saying. I think people look at that, a lot of that, but I don't want women also, especially women in any field, to forget that they're, you know, a woman before anything, and that
I love that
Ford is part of my pie, but he's not my whole pie.
I love that.
Right, and eventually he's gonna leave me, you know, and then have to have a full life without Ford, you know. So it's a good reminder that don't let that define your whole thing. But he's a very important part of my life.
We'll have to do a second one on, and news is so, I guess, maybe relevant in my house because Chris is like background, and he always talks about like I give a lot of a lot of credit to women that go into the news because it's so different for women and men in the news, and also like
yes.
and also not only expectation but also like longevity. Like men,
Yeah.
they take out like they get to stay longer in news
Yep.
Yes.
than women. I don't know if you want to like say something really quick on that, but like
And the appearance.
and the appearance is a
Yeah.
huge thing. And I know he's always like a male's career in the news can be twice as long as a woman's career based on expectations and appearance, which is so sad and disheartening to hear because it's not based on merit.
Yeah.
And I know you probably know more of that. And, that's just a little bit of what Chris has told me during the years. But
He's 100% right. Yeah, I think it's a lot harder for women. I think it's just a lot more pressure to keep the image, to seem a certain way. And actually, it starts from the beginning. Because when you're young, oh, you're too young. We're not going to believe her. So you're like dressing up to be someone that you're not, right? So like you're dressing up like an older news anchor. And then then eventually you become more comfortable in your own skin. But yeah, there's still a lot of pressure because we are in a like a visual space.
yeah.
But again, it's about developing sense of security, confidence, about being authentic. I know it sounds so cliche to say it, but it's the truth. Like it's being yourself, not overproducing or pretending. I think that's also social media has also changed and helped a lot with that, at allowing people to see a lot of your raw self. So then it's not a big change between this is you and this is, like they want the same person.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot more pressure for women, I believe. But I think social media has helped a little bit because they get to see a little bit of like your authentic self. But you just gotta be confident and also like not get carried away with like, I'm not just, like my image is like, now it's like a whole.
Yeah. But I think people can relate to
Package.
you and then they, the viewer connects with you and they're like, okay, this is a person
Yeah, and also it's a relationship that you build, right? It's like
Yeah.
a marriage. Like we have a history, we trust each other. Like there's history there. Like you invest in that more than anything.
Right. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for
Thank you,
coming on our
ladies.
Nice to
podcast
meet
today. It was awesome to be able to interview my dear friend and have her today
Thank
and share a little
you.
bit about what it really looks like to build a career that's been long lasting, all while balancing motherhood and all the things. But I love what you mentioned. It's also like not giving up. Like Ford is really an integral part, but also your
Yeah.
dreams and your career and everything that your family sacrificed so that we would, you could be here.
Yeah.
So I think that's beautiful. So thank you so much for being with us
Thank
today.
you.
Where could our viewers find you and also on the podcast?
Yeah, so my podcast is at Motherish Podcast. So it's MOTHERISH. You can find me on Instagram, all the platforms, and then you could just look for Pamela Silva in any of the platforms on Instagram, on Facebook, on X, on wherever it is.
Awesome.
And then also on Univision, if you get your news from us.
Yes. Thank you so much, friend.
We at Miss Esquire hope that you continue to grow your network and your net worth until we see you on the next podcast.
Yes. And if you want more information on how to join our incredible network of women professionals, you can email us at admin@missesquire.com. Until the next time, please like and subscribe for more episodes like this.